Hello everyone and welcome back. Today, I'll be sharing the tragic story of a beautiful, independent woman who fell victim to one of the most narcissistic and psychopathic individuals I have ever encountered. On November 9, 2023, just after midnight at 12:40 a.m., E.K. Amanjaldi received a text message from his sister, Saltanat Nukenova. In the message, she wrote, "I'm leaving Kwand, my husband. I'm taking a taxi and coming over now." This wasn't the first time she had attempted to leave him. In fact, it was nearly the 12th time she had tried. One day in September, Saltanat came home from work to a shocking sight. A woman's lipstick, foundation, and false eyelashes were scattered all over her bed sheets. The room reeked of sex, and there were 2 used condoms in the toilet. That was supposed to be the final straw. Her family stood by her, offering their support and even arranging a place for her to stay. But to their disbelief, she renewed her wedding vows with him the very next month, on October 26th, in a ceremony tied to Kazakh culture known as the Nika. Once again, her husband managed to win her back with his words, undoubtedly pleading for forgiveness and promising to change for good. EK texted her back, saying, "Come over, I'm waiting." However, this would be the last message he would ever exchange with his sister. Later that same day, at 8 p.m., emergency services responded to a call at an upscale restaurant located in Kazakhstan's capital, Astana. It was reported that a dispute had occurred between some guests, resulting in a woman succumbing to her injuries. The restaurant, known as Bao, is situated in the Gastro Center, a building owned by Kwand's extended family, located in one of the most affluent parts of the city. It's right next to the Ritz-Carlton and across the street from government offices, where prominent businessmen and officials often come to wine and dine. Upon arrival, the police were met by Kwand Bishay. He explained that he and his wife had an argument that night, during which things escalated, and she tripped, hitting her head on the toilet, which caused bruising. He claimed that he removed clumps of hair from her head, placed them on the table, and then laid her down to rest. He slept beside her, but when he woke up, she was still snoring. A few hours later, despite his and his cousin's attempts to revive her, they were unsuccessful. She remained unresponsive, so they decided to call for help. When the police entered the VIP room, they were met with a chaotic scene. Clothes were draped over the furniture, and items were scattered across the floor. The table was cluttered with glasses, empty wine bottles, a broken watch, jewelry, clumps of hair, and a napkin stained with red. The nearby curtains also had brown and red stains. But what really caught the police's attention was the restroom. The door had a hole in it, and inside, the tiles were visibly broken, with traces of blood, clear evidence that some level of violence had taken place before they arrived. On the sofa lay a woman wrapped in a blanket. As the police approached, it became clear that her face was severely bruised, swollen, and barely recognizable. Her body was cold to the touch, and she had no pulse. She had been dead for some time. There was nothing the police or paramedics could do to save her. The woman was identified as Saltanat Nukenova, the 31-year-old wife of Kwand Bishay. At the scene was also Kwand's cousin, Bazan Banov, the director of the Gastro Center where the restaurant is located. Both men were taken in for questioning by the police. Kwand Bishay was a well-known figure. In 2016, he served as the Minister of National Economy, but just 6 months into his term, he was accused of accepting bribes. He was forced to resign and was later convicted of the crime in March 2018. Although sentenced to 10 years in prison, he was released a year and a half later and officially pardoned shortly after. Despite his criminal past, Kwand lived a life of luxury, thanks to his shares in the family's businesses. His father was a prominent political figure, which allowed him to enjoy a privileged lifestyle. From a young age, Kwand was groomed to hold powerful political positions in the government to serve and lead his country. However, the events that would soon come to light would reveal just how far he had strayed from the path laid out for him. After a brief questioning at the scene, both Kwand and his cousin were arrested. The post-mortem report would later reveal the full extent of Saltanat's injuries. She had suffered 13 blows to the head, all caused by blunt force trauma. Her entire face was covered in multiple bruises, cuts, and abrasions. The severe head injury had shattered her nose, and the left side of her face bore numerous wounds that continued down and around her chin. She had suffered from a subdural hematoma, a condition where blood collects between the skull and the surface of the brain. In Saltanat's case, she had 230 milliliters of blood, a full glass, collected in her head. Left untreated, this condition causes brain herniation, where areas of the brain are pushed out of their normal position due to the pressure and swelling. Her death was attributed to the disruption of vital life-sustaining functions of the central nervous system, such as breathing and heart function. Additionally, she had marks and signs of strangulation. The toxicology report showed no drugs or medication in her system, and only low levels of alcohol were present. To understand what led to this tragedy, we must go back to where it all began for Saltanat. Nukenova was born into a respected family in Kazakhstan in 1992. Her grandfather, an honored teacher, had a judo tournament named in his memory. Her father was a successful businessman, and her uncle Kyron had a notable political career as a governor. Her family was deeply supportive of her and her brother, funding her education in England when she chose to pursue university studies there. In England, she developed a strong interest in psychology, astrology, and meditation. After a short time working in banking, she decided to leave and focus on these passions. Nukenova took several courses in astrology and began offering personal consultations. Her natural charm and skill at blending psychology with community events made her a popular astrologer, with clients booking sessions weeks in advance. She exclusively worked with women or couples, never seeing men alone. Financially independent, she supported herself and her brother without asking for help from her family. Her future plans included becoming a TV presenter and a YouTube personality, ambitions her family believed she would achieve. Her brother, Atek, noted that she went out of her way to assist people in difficult situations, such as helping a friend escape an abusive relationship over 10 years prior. Despite her ability to help others, Nukenova could not escape her own troubles. She caught the attention of Kwan Bishay through her Instagram account, which a mutual friend showed him. Although her assistant initially turned down his appointment request because she didn't see men alone, a woman named Camila managed to book a session under false pretenses, claiming she was bringing a man. Instead, she came alone and introduced Bishay to Nukenova. From May 2022, Bishay began sending Nukenova poems and insisted on meeting her. She was initially uninterested, focusing on her work and recent breakup from a 3-year relationship. However, Bishay persistently pursued her. He found Nukenova at her favorite spot one morning, introduced himself, and started a conversation about psychology, sparking their courtship. A few months later, Bishay invited Nukenova to a concert and, in October, to visit a friend in Baku, Azerbaijan. After these trips, Bishay finally won Nukenova's heart. She spoke warmly of him and expressed a desire to help him with his difficult family relationships. Her brother observed that she had fallen in love and idolized Bishay. Bishay, a 43-year-old with a complicated past, had experienced a high-profile career and a fall from grace. He attended George Washington University and held several influential positions before becoming Minister of Economy in 2016. After a brief downfall due to corruption charges, he recovered within 2 years and continued a luxurious lifestyle, supported by family business interests. Bishay had been previously married for 14 years and had 4 children. When he courted Nukenova, he was reportedly single. In December 2022, Nukenova and Bishay married despite her parents' concerns about his past, including his previous marriage, children, and fraud conviction. They organized a Kazakh wedding ceremony known as Nikah. Due to outdated information, they weren't officially registered but completed the religious ceremony, with Nukenova recognized as his de facto wife. After the wedding, Nukenova began experiencing physical violence. She didn't openly share this with anyone except her brother, who realized she was in trouble. During a honeymoon in the Maldives, her brother urged her to leave Bishay. Nukenova sent him photos to reassure him of their happiness, but he refused to look at them, disliking Bishay. These photos were later used by Bishay's defense to argue they were happy, though Nukenova's lawyers noted visible signs of abuse in them. On March 20th, 2023, Nukenova sent her brother photos showing signs of abuse and asked him to keep them, fearing her husband might delete them. Her brother confronted Betrayal, leading to a fight. After this confrontation, Nukenova was seen less frequently, as Betrayal restricted her interactions with friends and family. Although she communicated that they were often fighting, she didn't disclose details to anyone. Her tragic story unfolded after her death. Family and friends gradually began to understand the full extent of the abuse Nukenova had endured in the months leading up to her death. Betrayal was a controlling husband who forbade Nukenova from working, forcing her to cancel all her sessions. This halted her thriving career, making her financially dependent on him. Additionally, he restricted her social interactions, isolating her from friends and limiting her social life. When her brother suggested she leave Betrayal, Nukenova asked if he could support her financially until she could get back on her feet. She also revealed that Betrayal demanded a nude video of her as collateral, threatening to release it if she ever tried to leave him. This was a means to control her and destroy her reputation if necessary. She confided in a friend about feeling trapped in a cycle of physical violence and constant fear. After Nukenova's murder, it was confirmed in court that Betrayal had coerced her into recording a nude video to prevent her from blackmailing him with photos of her abuse. He used this video to maintain control over her, keeping her in a state of fear and continued violence. Nukenova felt hopeless and described her situation as such in a message to a friend on her last night alive. November 8, 2023. That evening, Nukenova received tickets to a concert by the popular Russian singer Dima Bilan, a favorite of her husband. She accepted the tickets and went with her friend, bringing her husband along. During the concert, a woman kissed Betrayal on the cheek, which sparked an argument between them. Given Betrayal's history of infidelity, this dispute led them to leave the concert early. They went to the Bao restaurant, where CCTV footage captured them entering and exiting several times, often arguing. The argument continued into the restaurant, where Betrayal accused Nukenova of clinging to past relationships. They had multiple physical altercations, some off-camera, but visible bruises on Nukenova indicated recent injuries. At one point, Nukenova called her brother, saying she intended to leave Betrayal. However, Betrayal convinced her to stay and reconsider her decision overnight. The following morning, around 7 a.m., Nukenova was beaten so severely at the restaurant that she did not survive. Footage shows Nukenova and Betrayal arriving at the Bao restaurant just before 9:15 p.m. on November 8th and leaving around 45 minutes past midnight. Their disagreement was evident, with Betrayal trying to offer Nukenova his overcoat, which she initially refused but later accepted. Their body language visibly changed after re-entering the restaurant. Nukenova was on her phone, and Betrayal appeared frustrated by this, watching over her. By 1 a.m., the argument continued, with Nukenova standing in the corner while Betrayal smoked. Despite the defense's claims that Nukenova was too intoxicated to stand, the prosecution argued that there were only faint traces of alcohol in her system. The footage clearly shows Betrayal physically dominating Nukenova, touching her face and head, and holding her head in his hands, staring into her eyes. This behavior, a hallmark of abusers, demonstrated his controlling nature. The footage reveals that despite being in a public place, Betrayal maintained his psychological and physical grip on Nukenova, creating an oppressive atmosphere for her. The argument lasted over 20 minutes, with Nukenova struggling with her thoughts, caught between her desire to leave and Betrayal's relentless control over her. Initially, Betrayal and Nukenova tried to maintain a calm demeanor, but their situation took a drastic turn later that night. By 1:15 a.m., their disagreement persisted with no signs of resolution. Around 2:30 a.m., they entered the restaurant for the third and final time. Nukenova headed straight to the VIP room while Betrayal went to the bar to get drinks. By just before 7 a.m., both were dressed more casually, Nukenova in a long jacket and Betrayal without a shirt. Outside, Nukenova appeared to be giving Betrayal the cold shoulder while he tried to convince her of something. They re-entered the restaurant at around 7:16 a.m. Nukenova went in first and didn't hold the door open for Betrayal, causing his hand to get stuck as he tried to enter. After retrieving his cell phone, he followed her inside where the tragic events unfolded. Once inside, Bishay violently grabbed Nukenova by the head and shook her, then pushed her backward. Nukenova, terrified, fell to the floor and curled into a fetal position, clutching her head. Bishay kicked her 3 times, each kick delivered with brutal force. Nukenova writhed in pain as he continued his assault. Bishay then pulled her up by the head with one hand. Despite her dazed state, she managed to stand with the help of a nearby cabinet. Bishay struck her hard with his left arm, causing her head to slam against the wall and then the cabinet. She gripped her head in agony. In a horrifying escalation, Bishay choked her with one hand while continuing to hit her with the other. Despite her defenselessness, Nukenova tried to walk away, driven by survival instincts. Bishay, however, viciously grabbed her by the hair, dragging her back into the adjacent toilet. At 7:18 a.m., they emerged from the restroom, with Bishay pulling her by the hair as she struggled to stay upright. The torment Nukenova endured was evident as she was dragged back into the VIP room, a place from which she would never leave alive. The camera footage captured only a portion of the abuse Nukenova faced, likely just the beginning of her suffering. Bishay later denied all responsibility for her death in court. He claimed that Nukenova, under the influence of alcohol, had made false accusations and provoked him. He alleged that she had attacked him and that he had only pushed her back and slapped her lightly to avoid causing harm. Bishay's defense was delusional, considering the CCTV footage clearly showed Nukenova never touched him. Even if she had provoked him, there was no justification for his violent reaction. Bishay further claimed that her severe head injuries were self-inflicted during an argument as she removed her jewelry and clothes. He suggested she lost her balance and hit her head on the toilet and then the floor. He absurdly testified that he had dragged her to the VIP booth and gently laid her on the sofa before falling asleep beside her. This testimony was dismissed by the jury, and forensic experts testified that her injuries could not have been caused by a fall. The extensive head and neck injuries, along with strangulation marks, contradicted Bishay's claims. Before 10 a.m., less than 3 hours before the fatal incident, Bishay's cousin, Bazan, was seen entering the restaurant. He went straight to the VIP booth, returned with a blanket, and later instructed the staff to leave. Bazan also deleted CCTV footage from inside and outside the restaurant and turned off the cameras. Fortunately, digital forensics recovered the footage, which played a crucial role in the highly publicized trial of Bishay and Bazan. On the day of the tragic events, heightened security was in place due to President Vladimir Putin's scheduled visit to Russia. To cover his tracks, Bishay enlisted the help of his cousin, Bazan. They not only deleted the CCTV footage and asked the restaurant staff to leave but also manipulated Salon's cell phone to create false GPS pings, making it seem like she was alive and well. Bazan took her phone to various locations around the city, including a fitness center, then set it to airplane mode before bringing it home. This created the illusion for Salon's brother, Ibek, that she was simply delayed in coming over and might have been sleeping. Ibek received a text from Salon at 12:40 a.m. on November 8th, saying she was getting a taxi and coming over. Noticing her upset tone, he reassured her that he was at home and asked her to come. When he checked her phone's location, it showed she was at the gastro center where the restaurant was located. At 2:05 a.m., he sent her a message asking when she would arrive. She read the message and made a brief call, which she ended before he could answer. He tried calling her back, but there was no response. Her phone's location then shifted to the adjacent Talent Towers, where he assumed she was staying overnight. This assumption aligned with the CCTV footage showing Salon and Bishay outside at 7:46 a.m. Ibek texted her again, but her phone still showed she was at Talent Towers, so he thought she was just sleeping. When the message was marked red around lunchtime, he believed she had woken up and checked out. However, that evening, Salon's friend, Lenera, called to inform him that Bishay had been arrested on suspicion of her murder. This shocking news prompted Ibek to rush to Salon's home, where he found no one answered the door and the lights were off. He then went to the restaurant, where he discovered the horrifying truth. A call to his father to confirm the news was overheard by his mother, who screamed upon learning of her daughter's death. Bishay's trial, broadcasted on YouTube, began on March 11, 2024. Bishay insisted on a public trial, believing it would garner sympathy. However, his attempt to appeal to conservative norms by highlighting Salon's alleged misconduct backfired. The CCTV footage clearly showed him as the sole aggressor, and the evidence of their troubled marriage did not earn him any sympathy. His defense team's attempts to tarnish Salon's character only fueled public outrage. Kazakhstani society widely rejected the defense's moral double standards. Bishay and Bazan's deceitful actions did not sit well with the judge or jury. Bishay was found guilty of torture and murder, receiving a combined sentence of 24 years in prison, 7 years for torture and 20 for murder. Bazan, the director of Gastroenter, was found guilty of concealing a serious crime and sentenced to 4 years in a medium-security prison, with credit for time already served. Salon's death sparked a significant public outcry for legal reform in Kazakhstan. The new law, effective June 2024, criminalizes all forms of domestic abuse and mandates police investigation for every reported case. Saltanat Nukenova, may you rest in peace. Your tragic death will not be in vain. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more shocking and compelling stories ahead.